ASEAN member states and partner nations wrapping up 4 days of talks in Manila, with 4 countries signing on to a legally binding agreement for regional peace. The Treaty of Amity and Cooperation marking 50 years since creation by ASEAN's 5 founding members. The accession of Sweden, Poland, Romania and Lithuania, bringing the total number of parties to 59. As the curtains come down on the ASEAN meeting in Manila, clashes again in the South China Sea, with Manila accusing Chinese vessels of firing a water cannon on government boats near Scarborough Shoal for a second straight day. In the third flare-up between the two sides this week, China says it took what it calls control measures against Philippine vessels that China says were operating illegally, while maintaining it does not see dispute in the South China Sea as impeding ties with ASEAN. Maritime security concerns from the Strait of Hormuz at the South China Sea have emerged as the hottest topic at this week's ASEAN meetings in the Philippines. Leong, CNA senior correspondent, brings us this report.
Fresh clashes in the Middle East broke out ahead of the week-long series of ASEAN meetings in Manila. And a day before the meeting started, the Philippines and China accused each other of starting this confrontation near the disputed Second Thomas Shoal in the South China Sea. Days later, Scarborough Shoal came under the spotlight. China claimed Philippine vessels invaded into its waters. The Philippines accused China Coast Guard of spraying water cannon at its vessels. Earlier, the bloc's foreign ministers expressed serious concern over the increasingly volatile situation in the Strait of Hormuz, which, while geographically further from the region, is not just diplomatically close, but also economically significant to it.
Iran demands the right, which they do not have under any existing legal mechanism, to control the transit of traffic through the Straits of Hormuz. And if we create a precedent in the Middle East where a nation-state can decide that they are going to control an international waterway, charge a toll, and if you don't pay them, blow up your ships, we have created a very dangerous precedent, which will repeat itself in other parts of the world, including in this region.
Singapore Foreign Minister Vivian Balakrishnan said the recent escalation in the Strait of Hormuz, including attacks on Saudi tankers in the Red Sea, was one central concern at the ASEAN meetings.
I'm glad to report that amongst all the speeches made by a very wide range of foreign ministers, everyone doubled down on the need to comply with international law, to maintain the primacy of UNCLOS and freedom of navigation and overflight. So basically, the secondary concern was compliance with international law.
But still, there are differences to be managed. Countries like Australia, Japan and the Philippines have criticized China for recent maritime drills, citing safety concerns. China views its drills as routine and not targeting any third country. Aside from bloc to partner discussions, bilateral meetings were also on the agenda, including talks between China and the Philippines. Ms. Lazaro said the recent maritime incidents would become part of the Code of Conduct negotiations, but didn't go into detail. But overall,
on the South China Sea, what was given attention is the Code of Conduct that ASEAN now and China is geared towards the conclusion, hopefully the conclusion of the Code of Conduct by the end of this year. And this seems to be the focus of many of the countries, and I can see some political will from all the countries involved.
US and China's top diplomats also held closed-door meetings in Manila.
I think to their credit, both of them are trying to approach this in a careful, deliberate and constructive way. In particular, I would say I'm glad that at least at this point in time, neither of them are forcing us to choose sides.
Close to home, the Myanmar crisis was discussed. Thailand recently mentioned Aung San Suu Kyi as among a set of indicators to measure the progress made by Min Aung Hlaing's administration in implementing the 5-point consensus. Critics often worry she would be exploited and used as a bargaining chip.
Well, first, she's not a chip to be bargained over. I mean, she's the leader of a political party which clearly enjoys significant support in Myanmar. what ASEAN has said is if there are going to be changes in our engagement, it has to be predicated on measurable progress that a reasonable person looking at the parameters can say, yes, this is positive. So the examples of these parameters: reduce the violence, hopefully even eliminate violence against civilians and vulnerable groups, the release of political prisoners. Aung San Suu Kyi is one of those prisoners. But the purpose of the release is not just release for release sake, but in order to enable honest-to-goodness conversations, reconciliation, and a solution that is Myanmar-led and owned by the Myanmar people themselves.
If ASSK or Aung San Suu Kyi can be some kind of an element, perhaps, but what is still important for us is the 5-point consensus. Again, those 4 points that has been discussed.
Philippines Foreign Secretary Teresa Lazaro plans to make a trip to Myanmar in the second half of the year. The big question is whether the Min Aung Hlaing-led administration will allow her access to Aung San Suu Kyi. Leong, CNA, Manila.